name is Chase Vibe. I represent North Minneapolis. I represent youth work. I represent good music, hip hop specifically, because a lot of people are afraid to say that they're rappers. I represent being a rapper. And I represent speaking truth to power, anti-capitalism, all that kind of shit. I was born and I lived at my grandma's house for about 2 decades of my life, and that was in North Minneapolis. And living over north, like, it's so different to be an artist and be from over north, because like a lot of people equate Minneapolis's hip hop scene with South Minneapolis, and there's a specific sound and aesthetic that comes from that. Whereas when you're from North Minneapolis, there hasn't been like a specific artist you could look to who's from there you could say made it. At least when I was growing up, you could look at like Nimic Revenue, B. Croc, Mac Turner for people like who are doing their thing right now. But like over and above all, like people look at Atmosphere, people look at the South Side, because that's the whole culture that got built around what Atmosphere and Rhymesayers did. So musically, like, we're still a developing sound. We're still coming together. But as a community, a lot of people look at North Minneapolis, they use words like violence and underserved and all that kind of stuff. And it's weird because it's always people who don't live there, who aren't from there, who don't understand it. North Minneapolis, like any community, has its issues, but it's a very vibrant community. It's a very beautiful and loving community. I work with youth, and I've worked all over North Minneapolis and outside of it too. And like, I know how families show up, and I know like how these kids show up and what they look up to and what they see and what their dreams are. Is this place over-policed? Why are there so many police here? If the police are bored, they're going to obviously find crimes. Not necessarily those are happening, or those are happening at any higher rate than they would elsewhere. Why do so little people have access to healthcare? Why do people have so little access to well-paying jobs? Why is it a food desert? Like, there's a lot that you could speak for that are systemic issues. And so when people talk about North Minneapolis, I focus more on like the people, and I focus more on like wanting it to shift, you know? When people talk about violent protests, well, if it starts with a police officer killing somebody, isn't that the initial act of violence? And if someone breaks a window, is that really violence, you know? So, I don't know. That's my complicated answer about North. I love the community, and it's a very predominantly black community. So, you know, I have a lot of love for black people, for black community, for black art, because I grew up in that environment. And, you know, I can't just like come in and like not speak to that, because to ignore it and like reap benefits from things like hip hop, like, it seems awkward to me, and it's not morally right. Because it's just like, you know, Minneapolis as a music community is a very white community in a lot of spaces. And that means like there is a certain culture, and a lot of things don't get talked about the way they should. Whereas if you book me for a show, I'm gonna find time to say something. Like, if it's not in my lyrics, it'll be in between songs. It's, you know, just something I care about a lot, and I feel is the right thing to do. I try to understand youth perspective, like being a youth worker, like, so XXX Tentacion, I don't really rock with him at all, because like I know his history and who he was as a person, but I see the effect he had on youth who were struggling with like their own like mental health issues. And I can't immediately say like he's garbage to those youth, because then that's just them being on the defense and like, oh, he's so misunderstood. But like speaking to them, like to the artists who were more positive, that kind of had that same message when I was growing up, like, oh, you should maybe, you know, like check out Kid Cudi. That was someone who was there for me when I was that age. And then like eventually getting to that path of like, you know, abused people. And like eventually, you know, like coming to an understanding of like, yes, you might be hurting somewhere inside, but that doesn't mean you hurt somebody outside. as an artist, I love like just having like certain sounds, and like they're not necessarily trap beats, but I love trap beats too. I love all forms of like hip hop because it's just a form of different forms of music, different like sounds that you can create. So like I like to pull from many influences to figure out what I want to do, and in doing so, like I also like to slip in things like that are important to me. So I have a song like Buzzin', and Buzzin' is a very cheery, like piano driven, gospel inspired instrumental behind me. And like for the most part it's a fun song. It's like all this hype around my name got me buzzing, buzzing, and like all of that is fun, and like that's a fun way to turn up. And like all throughout like the verses, like I say things like, and we don't fuck with cops. I'm sorry, Mrs. Officer, for every person shot. I'm calling for abolishment. And like all this is riding on like this wave of positivity, but it's like also saying something. Like that's kind of where my music goes, and who I feel like as a person, and who I feel like I am as a performer. Like I'll give you as much energy as I can, and I'll have like as much fun as possible, but at the end of the day, like what I want you to walk away with is what I'm saying in between. And like I would say I'm reasonably funny on stage. Like I try and interject jokes in between. I'm pretty self-depreciating, like, because at the end of the day, like I might be like an artist and a performer, but like I'm also just a regular person. I'm not really all that much special, like in comparison to someone else. Like some other people have different skills than I do. That doesn't mean like I'm somehow above them. So like I love just having like a good nature, a good humor about it, and be self-depreciating, because like I know I'm dope. I know I'm great at what I do. So like I don't have to like sit up there and like lecture someone on like why you should fuck with me, because like you choose to or you don't. But like I know at the end of the day I came and did what I did, and I'm good. I am a youth worker first and foremost. So I work in a school. I work in various after school programs as well, and like that's the majority of my day outside of music. So
yeah,
I work with elementary school age kids and middle school age kids, and I have a group that I actually just left from. We do service projects for the community. My after school group, we work on academics and things like that. In the summers I do freedom schools. So like I'm pretty like versatile. It's not just one thing that I do like in youth work. It's just something that like is very passionate and important to me. Something I've been doing since I was a teenager. So I'm an introvert. So like everything I do requires some form of extroversion. Like you know, being an artist, performing and having to make connections. Even like the recording process, as lonely as that can feel, it's like I still have to talk to producers. I still have to talk to engineers. If I want a feature, like I don't ask for a feature like from people I don't know, like just for like clout. Like I like to have relationships with the people I work with. So like, you know, like that requires having a relationship. So you know, a lot of what I do, like in classroom settings, in like music settings, in performance settings, in like activist settings, like requires me to kind of step out of like my comfort zone. And that, you know, like after a while can be a little exhausting. So I like to find myself at home chilling on occasion. For me, I just released an album 2 months ago. It's called Love Again. And from there, like it's my most complete body of work. It's the one that makes the most sense for me. It represents who I am musically and personally and lyrically. And the cover of it, like I'm in this jacket, the Lowry Bridge is behind me. It's representing like I got the North Side behind me on this. You know, like it came together like in the exact way that I wanted it to. And that's what I want to focus on for this next year, is like I don't want to be someone who just like drops something, especially that I care about, and that's it. Like I want to do more with it. So what's coming is going to be videos. What's coming is going to be shows. Like what's coming is going to be promotion around that and remixes and all that type of stuff. Like, this is something that I care about deeply and I want to live, you know? So, I mean, that happened before this album. The year before, around the same time, I released an EP. And like in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna do a bunch of videos to this. And then I kind of just like tapered off from it. I was like, let me kind of figure out what I want to actually do. And that wasn't because I didn't believe in the music, but it was because I was in a transitional phase. Like, my old engineer was Katana Dadan, and she moved to Colorado. And so I kind of had to figure out like what my baseline setup was going to be, who my team was. And, you know, I took time to figure that out. And I was like, okay, well, I want to push forward on this so that I can really build on this, because I have people around me, again, that I really want to like create something with.
Who are they?
So the man behind a lot of my music is Ozzy the Painter.
Hey.
Yeah, he produced half of my album, 5 out of the 10 songs on there. He mixed everything, he recorded all my vocals, deeply involved with it. My DJ, Queen Dween, we've done a lot of work together and we're continuing that relationship. My photographer, Ariel Cherry, she has done all of my projects' cover art. So starting from way back in 2016 with projects that you can't find on the internet anymore, up till now, we've kind of like grown together. Like, her as a photographer, me as an artist, like as a hip hop artist, as a rapper. We've grown together. So like, you can see that reflected in the work that we do together. And you know, Zeus James like has finally stepped into, not finally, but he has recently stepped into a role of a manager for me. And that's something different. Like, we had a friendly relationship and he really believed in my music, and he was one of the few people like who sought me out, you know, like while I was figuring everything out, and he's been by my side for all of that. So him stepping into that role and taking on more responsibility like just lets me know I have a solid foundation behind me, and I don't really need to reach for names like for like whoever is buzzing on the scene. Like, I have my team and we're gonna rise up together. There's gonna be a lot more attention on this music scene.
Okay.
There's gonna be a lot more national coverage. I don't know if Minneapolis will become like one of the hubs. Like, I won't say Atlanta, because Atlanta, like, they have such a good infrastructure that like I don't see any other city being like that. But like a place like Chicago, a place like LA, where we have like these subculture, these subgenres of hip hop that really explode, like that's what I kind of see for Minneapolis and what I hope for Minneapolis, because we have a lot of artists who are starting to make those waves. When you look at someone like Student One or Nerdy or Dua Salah, like Destiny, even like Destiny Roberts, there is a lot of hype behind them. There's a lot of like attention on them. There's a lot of like placements that go behind that. And that's not for nothing. Like, I might not make the same music as someone like Dua or someone like Student One or Nerdy or even Destiny. I don't know why I keep saying or even Destiny. But like all of that leads back to a common connection of like, this is the Twin Cities, this is Minnesota, this is Minneapolis, this is St. Paul. And people are going to start digging into, well, what else is in this city? If these people are so dope coming from here, who else is out there? And like, I think that's going to lead to a more dramatic rise that we've seen from the city in some time. Like, I'm a fan of the Minnesota scene in its current form. I love a lot of artists that aren't necessarily from my team, that aren't people I necessarily have relationships with. I'm just a big fan of them, and like that just leads me to having like more genuine conversations when I'm like, I love Lady Midnight, and we've had conversations, and she is like the sweetest person. And I don't know why, out of all things, the one time I saw her a few months ago, I was like, you know, I really love how you format your Instagram. I'm like, what am I talking about, of all things? But like, you know, just that kind of like focus on art, like that attention to detail, like that shows to me like a creative eye. That shows to me like, you know, something important. That's something like the way you represent yourself, the way you carry yourself is important. You know, Michael Jackson, Thriller. What comes to mind when you think that?
The jacket.
The jacket. So like, Love Again, like this whole era, like this is what I'm going to be rocking. Like, is this jacket? Like, there's not like a significant story behind it. Someone got it for me, a coworker from an old job that I worked. But you know, this is cool. Like, jacket, it stands out. It's eye catching. People talk to me about it. So.
And the 94.
The 94 year I was born.
Okay.
So 1994. Yeah. You know, I want to kind of like be able to be represented in eras across my projects. So like I want to have different like time stamps, you know, looks and stuff. I'm Chase Vibe. This is Staring at the City, and it's Love Again.